Right. So great to see you today, Dave. I think it's been about 2 years since Super Bowl out in LA. So welcome back. It's great to be back in touch.
Dave, we can't hear you.
Never's fun. Never's. Go ahead, Chris.
Well,
Sorry.
we can kick it. You want to do it
All
again? Do it again. Do it again. It's fine. They'll cut at the beginning. So you were on. So
It's so great to see you again, Dave. I think it's been 2 years since Super Bowl out in Los Angeles. So welcome back.
Good to be back. We got never as fun as Super Bowl weekends in Los Angeles, but we'll be all right. Vegas is this year, so maybe we'll reconvene in Vegas.
that would be fun.
Absolutely, we need to reconvene in Vegas because LA was fun, but nothing like a Vegas Super Bowl. So
Although I'm a little worried about the thing about Super Bowl weekends is they're like 7 days, and no one wants to be in Vegas for 7 days. You want to be in Vegas for like 48 hours. So I don't know. I'm a little worried about people lasting that long during Super Bowl week as it is.
Fair
we
point.
can prep up, do some IVs, get your electrolytes. No, so great that you're on today. Our audience always gets pumped up to hear the transition from NFL athletes, athletes in general, pro athletes, transitioning into business. So our audience is very excited about today's topic.
Great. Yeah, I'd be excited. It'll be fun to talk about. I'm still in the middle of it. I feel like a transition never ends to a degree, but yeah.
Yeah, the life of a CEO and founder. I mean, at the transition, the graph is, up and down, up and down, up and down. Let's get started. Can you walk us through your transition? Let's go all the way back to Colorado State University. Let's go back to CSU to the NFL as a player, 6 years, 3 teams, to being the co-founder, CEO of Breakaway Data.
Sure. So let's see. I graduated high school in 2002, which is weird to say now. Went to Colorado State over some better schools as against the advice of my mom and dad. My goal was always to be like a Stanford kid growing up. I thought I was going to go play football and go to school at Stanford. And then Tyrone Willingham left for Notre Dame, so there went my scholarship. And then I think same one for Cal and some other schools that I was looking at. But Colorado State was the first school to ever offer me a scholarship. I really liked Sonny Lubick when I went there. I really enjoyed it. They brought out a bunch of the academic advisors when I was there, which is, they said, pretty unique to Colorado State, which was kind of funny. And I fell in love with a woman named Ann Gill, who would end up being my advisor at the liberal arts college. And while I was kind of heavy in math in high school, I didn't want to major in math or major in computer science in college. It doesn't really mix well with football. Majored in liberal arts and speech communication, which hopefully helps me out on this interview. But yeah, went there at Colorado State. 3.5 years there, graduated a semester early, and broke a bunch of records when I played there. I left school as the leading receiver, all-time leading receiver, and then got drafted in the 7th round by the Houston Texans. That was 2006. That was Gary Kubiak's first year, the 4th year of the Texans' existence. So a lot of people in Los Angeles didn't even know who the Houston Texans were. They used to say like, "Oh, congratulations, you guys just beat USC in the Rose Bowl." I was like, "No, that's Texas." But we're a real NFL team. We got they pay us to play. We got people in the stands and cheerleaders and mascots, all the stuff. So it was on the Texans from 2006 to 2012. Had a brief cup of coffee with the Broncos, and then finished my career on the Redskins with Kyle Shanahan and that whole team. So kind of the way professional sports works to a degree is you end up in like a family tree. If you try to follow football really closely, there's the numbers system, which is kind of Norv Turner's, and that's like they call a play a certain way. They call it defense a certain way. And then there's the West Coast offense, which is Kyle Shanahan, which is formerly Mike Shanahan, which is formerly Bill Walsh, and they call play a certain way. And then there was what the Patriots do, which is like a mix of the two, of course. And I had been in all 3 systems, and so I could speak all the languages in the NFL. So I was a valuable player, and then which allowed me to bounce to a couple different teams. But yeah, I was part of that. When I see Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, DeMeco Ryans, all those guys being NFL coaches, those were guys that were quality control coaches or peon graduate assistants, or D'Amico Ryans I was drafted with in 2006. So these are guys that I kind of quote unquote grew up in the league with that are now head coaches, which is fun to see. I finished in 2013, was the real kind of official year that my retirement started. After which I went to business school. Did full-time, got my full-time MBA in Southern California at USC. I went back to my roots in data science and data analytics and math. And the first job I had out of business school was at Second Spectrum. I was the sixth employee at a startup started by two AI research professors at USC. Second Spectrum was just an analytics idea at that point. Really, we were selling to a couple NBA teams, one of them being the Clippers and the Mavericks, and I think at that time we had the Celtics and the Spurs. All the best teams were getting into this tracking space. So basically, right now in every sport, they track where and when a player moves. And the reason you do that is you can understand, that's when they talk about load in the NBA. That's what we were doing. Is if I know how far you run and how often you do that, I can measure how much energy you're essentially expending at any given time. And that adds up to a load measurement. We were kind of the first to do that. And that company grew to 80 people. We sold, I left right before they sold, but we ended up selling that company to Genius Sports, which is publicly traded. And then for a while, I was just kind of a consultant trying to figure out what my next move was. And we started Breakaway Data with my co-founder, Steve Guerra. We realized that everyone in this space was building technology and data for the leagues and teams. And what I meant by built by them, I don't necessarily just mean selling to them. I meant built with them in mind, build a product for them. And I realized that at this time, you had precision medicine, and which was going direct to consumer. So they were building products for the direct to consumer. You had Apple Watches were taking off, and people were paying more attention to their own health, and athletes were wearing it in games. You had Whoop come around, and people were wearing those in games. And then you obviously had the tracking data that I was a part of, and there's all this Moneyball explosion. And I was like, well, the athlete seems to be the one on the outside of this situation. Wonder if they're ever going to get their data. And so that's what we help do. So Breakaway Data is our platform is about giving the athlete back and access to their information. And then once they have all of that, we come up with creative ways how to monetize it. And we've been successful in that. Been around, this will be our third year, really kind of moving and grooving with Breakaway. And as you were right, the transition is like this, but so is the startup world. It's you gotta get off the roller coaster when you're the CEO and just try to ride it, no matter how high it is or how low it is. Just kind of ride it out. But it's been fun, and my career in sports has certainly helped dealing with a lot of the things I see today as a CEO.
Yeah, I was just I could only imagine some of the skill set, mindset that you had to have as an athlete, a professional athlete, how it helped you prepare. Some things probably, directly correlated. Some things you just had to figure out the hard way. But walk us through kind of some of the skill sets or mindset that the NFL prepared you for being a CEO.
You got to be mentally tough, because the majority of people are going to tell you no. When you raise money, they're going to tell you no. When they hear about your product, they're going to tell you no. When they're going to see your product working, they're going to tell you no. And so it's a lot of no's. And when I was going up telling everyone I was going to play in the NFL, they're like, you're a 5'11" white dude. You're not playing in the NFL. And so you just ignore them and move on. And then you prove them wrong stage and time again. And then you get to a point where you see everyone in high school and they're like, I knew you were going to make it. I knew you were the best on our team. I knew you were going to play in the NFL. And I wanted to go back and be like, I want that Progressive commercial where I can go and rewind and be like, why don't there was a time when you could have told me I was going to make it. I believe you said the exact opposite, but you just let those go away. And so I'd say the first thing it prepares you got to be mentally tough. The second thing is really, like, I always tell guys this is, while you don't have the business acumen as a lot of guys do, because you spent your 20s and maybe, if you're lucky enough, your early 30s playing professional sports, so your kind of business IQ might be a little less. Your emotional and EQ is off the charts. And it's like that of like a 60-year-old, because when I first got in the NFL, the player to my left was Mark Bruner. He was in year 13 in the NFL. He had 3 children. He was on the last year of his career. There was obviously things that were way more important in life to him than running around and running into people. He certainly didn't care about, he wasn't a single male out doing what single male do in the NFL, right? So like he had his goals and initiatives, which were way different. And he went to UW, was a first round pick out of University of Washington, and like had been to a bunch of graduate school education stuff, and was the first person to tell me about business outside of the NFL. And then to my right was Jacoby Jones, and Jacoby was Tulane College, didn't graduate, could care less about some of this stuff, was just from backwoods Louisiana, amazing human, but you have to navigate. You're sitting in between those two people, and you have to navigate that. And the one caveat that I would say that makes it even extra interesting is the transparency is like that transparency doesn't exist in the business world. I knew exactly how much they made. I knew exactly how many reps they get in practice. I knew exactly what they were supposed to do. I heard every meeting they've ever been in. I know what the coaches expect them to do. You don't get that in the business world. You don't sit next to your engineer and know exactly what they're supposed to do, know exactly what their deliverables look like, know exactly how much they get paid. Like all that stuff is kept secret. And so you deal with these transparencies, you deal with these problems and these issues that really help you grow up fast. Not to mention you get paid really well to start off with. So a lot of times you become the biggest breadwinner in your family, and you buy a house at 22 years old, and you deal with mortgage payments and lease payments. And I mean, I was overdrafting $9 at Colorado State. You go from that to like now all of a sudden you're buying a house. It's like a wildly different world that you're like they should do financial literacy. I'm like, there's no chance, it's never going to work. So anyway, your EQ goes off the charts, which prepares you for being a CEO. I'd say those two things are the mental toughness and the EQ is definitely kind of been the best for me, or at least helped me the most.
Matilda, do you want to ask a couple of business questions?
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if you were gonna follow up on that, but Dave, I'll start by saying you're probably one of the smartest former NFLers in my network. If that's anything.
I don't know how many you know. You might only know 3.
I was gonna say I was gonna attribute it to the people you've surrounded yourself with. May I'll add Annalise to that, perhaps, maybe.
Sure. My wife's
No, I mean, and all great, in full fairness and in compliment. I think, from the first time I met you, I thought you were really well versed. And one of the things I thought Chris was actually going to ask you, and maybe I can have you comment on this, is you sound so eloquent now in the business world. Had I not known that you were a former NFL player, I probably wouldn't have guessed it, because I don't think you look, you're right, I don't think you look like an NFL player. You may look like someone who grew up in Silicon Valley. And so just how did you even adjust your mindset, right, from on the field to the boardroom? So I think you answered that by saying just having that level of EQ and mental toughness developed on field. So
don't get me wrong, I still got a lot of locker room in me, where I probably have some HR issues that arise every now and then. But like, I don't know, you just well, okay, so a good example is like in the NFL, you're just supposed to figure it out, right? Like you get in there. It's like any sport. Like I watched my daughter play her first basketball game on Sunday. Like you just kind of roll the ball out there and you figure it out, right? Like, hey, here's some basics. This is a jump stop, and this is how the goal is to put the ball in the basket and to stop the other team from putting the ball in the basket. And as complicated as sports get, as it gets to the top, it's also the most simplistic form. Is like, my job is to beat the guy in front of me, and this is the route I have, but like, you gotta kind of maneuver, you gotta figure it out, because how I run a route is way different than, Andre Johnson, who's 6'2", way bigger, way faster, and way stronger than me. I gotta figure out how I do it. And I think like that is something you do in business as a startup. You're like, here's what it looks like on a slide deck. And my job is to convince you to give us money from the slide deck. But how it looks in real life is like wildly different. And which is why, like, whenever I think about investments, I'm betting on jockeys. Like, yes, the idea is there, but like how it's actually going to be done is like maybe 3 of those slides are relevant, right? Like it's like, are you willing to shoulder the burden when like no one else believes? Are you willing to like fly to Charleston, South Carolina and like monitor athletes when no one else can do it. Like there's just things that you have to deal with as a CEO and when you're running a business that like there's no playbook for. Like there's kind of like a loose diagram what you got to do, but you got to beat the guy in front of you. And for business perspective, you got to win the day. You got to win that kind of opportunity, and you got to put one foot in the front of the other. And then also there are times when like you lose and you made a bad decision, and you got to kind of let it go and keep going, because there's a lot of that in the startup, in the business world in general, but especially the startup world, where you're like, man, we bet on this aspect of the company, we're wrong. And it doesn't mean we're all wrong and the whole thesis is wrong, but this approach was wrong, and that's okay. We'll go this way.
Right, right. I also think that unless you're in the business of like drug discovery or like very specific new tech development, very rare is an idea completely novel on its own, right? So you're really investing in the founder, the team, the execution strategy altogether. And so just to bring it back to Breakaway and where you are today, you and I spoke about the company a couple years ago, and we've always talked about just the impact that you wanted to bring to athletes and players with regards to their own data. How do we collect it? How do we give it back to them? How do we package it? How do we bring it to market? Help demystify some of like what that means, because I think since we've last spoken, an onslaught of companies in this space coming in, right? Saying that they're going to help the athlete, they're going to help the team, they're going to help the league, help the consumer, right? What space specifically are you playing in? Like, give us some use cases.
So when we first kind of envisioned Breakaway, we knew that athlete data was a category that was coming along. And what I mean by athlete data is, you could say there are like four different data sets that go into an athlete's record or athlete data, right? There's your on-field performance or your game stats. There's what you do off the field for training and whatever. Are you wearing a catapult device when you run? Are you jumping on vaulted force plates? Are you how are you tracking? Is there something in your insoles, whatever? That's your training information. There's wearables, right? Which now everyone kind of wears to monitor sleep, or maybe they're a Whoop and they're doing, how much did I drink and how does that affect my strain, right? So that's the wearables, that's your third bucket. And then the fourth is your medical records, right? And so those are the four buckets of information that, in my opinion, make up a complete athlete record. And I knew those are valuable to the team. I had been part of that firsthand. I had seen how much money they spent on hiring personnel to make sure that they had the right personnel to analyze those records. I knew that was valuable to the league because they were paying for technologies like Second Spectrum to install 8 cameras in every place, multi-million-dollar contracts to extract this data. And so you ultimately knew that it should be valuable to the athlete. At first, I didn't even think they were aware of a lot of this data that was collected. Of course, they're aware on stuff that they collect themselves or that they wear themselves, but there's way more of that out there. And to be honest, having played in the NFL, even a lot of our medical records we're not really aware of. In terms of like, you get banged up in the middle of the game, they'll run you into the back and do a bunch of x-rays on you, then sprint you back out into and go play. Like, you don't see those records. It's not like when you or I now go get our shoulder check or our shoulder from falling down. Like, we know we set an appointment, we talked to the doctor, we did the x-rays, we went for a bet, we did all like that. Doesn't exist in the leagues. Like all of this information is collected and used by people, very oftentimes never the athlete. And so I always knew that collecting that information would have a ton of value for the athlete and their team. And by I mean their team and their agents, their coaches and the people that surround them. And at the very end of those people that surround them are fans, right? Is that like they're interested in the athlete, they're interested in this information, but they're not interested in a data format, they're interested in a story format. And so it was really coming up with, like, over the course of our company's careers, like, what is the format you deliver athlete data? And like that is the difficult part, is like, you can have a database, but if no one's buying your data, you got to kind of lead the horse to water, to say. And so that's when we created the app, which essentially became our container, and where we put all that information. And leagues and teams have been like, yes, we want to give our players access to their information, we'll purchase your product. And so that's when we started to see some see the snowball effect start happening, is when is when other players and other leagues and other teams see that some athletes have access to everything that they've ever done, they're like, well, we should give our players that. I don't see anything wrong happening, right? Like, what's the worst case scenario if all my players understand their injury records? I'm willing to bet they'll pay it more attention, which means they'll probably be healthier.
Right, right. So Breakaway's in the business of, and like pulling together all these different pieces of data, making sense of it. And I guess the secret sauce is really presenting in a format that the end user, here in this case, the pro athletes, can consume it to better their athleticism, right?
That's a fair way to describe it. And then there's probably like 2 or 3 kind of secret sauces. One is just kind of the background of everyone in the building, starting with myself, in terms of like players and people that are actually, on the field that know what the appetite and the time constraints and the issues that players have when they do view their information, right? It's a lot different than us as normal citizens. And that, like, when are they going to look at it? Oh, they're going to look at it right before practice. They might look at it at a bye week, or there might be some situations. So you have to meet them where they're at with the product, right? You're right. Visualizations are key. These are 22-year-old athletes that, like, they're used to seeing some charts, but they're not going to read a Gantt chart. They're not going to read a lot of, it's got to be bar graphs. Even a spider graph kind of is like annoying, right? It's got to be interactive, and it's got to be stuff that's pretty clear and how it articulates it. And like, you don't get a lot of space on these things. So you got to figure that out. But I would say the thing that we have gotten the most value out of late is that when you are a data company, you're an artificial intelligence, you're a data science company. And that was not something that we were like shouting from the rooftops and like, here's what we are, we're all AI, because I knew the first problem was organizing the data in one place. But when you think about how easy it is to create recommendations and insight engines, if you only do that from your own data, like, I'll use Whoop as an example. I love Whoop, but they can only give you insights from Whoop. I can give you Whoop insights connected to your Apple Health insights, connected to your Oura Ring insights, connected to your Catapult insights, connected to your GameStat insights in one place. So I can reference all of that data and provide an athlete a much better picture of what's going on, why they're having issues, and stuff like that. So in a way, our secret sauce is that because we have access to this data, we can be like a sports scientist on your phone.
Right. I was actually since talking to you very deeply on this topic a couple years ago, you guys have been on a race, right, to every league. I also think the winner in the space will be the ones who's able to get their platform into as many athletes, leagues, teams, federation, clubs, you name it, right? The winner will be the one that's omnipresent, if you will.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we've already seen a couple of different competitors in different categories and take a slightly different approach. And it means we're going in the right way. So it's always scary if you're the only restaurant on the block. That's not a good thing. So I know that we're going in the right direction, and people kind of believing what we're preaching. The fun and kind of difficult part is some leagues and teams are a lot more forward thinking than others, while others should be, because our product is more valuable for, obviously, I think our product is probably the most valuable players who injure the most, which is NFL players, but the NBA moves much faster than the NFL. So and that's the difference in the normal market, right? I know exactly who our product would be more valuable for. You can kind of give it to them, you can build that product for, but you can't do that in sports. Sometimes the league or the team that you want to work with most is not ready for you, and so you got to kind of figure out who to work with. So you go with those first movers, and for us that's been the NBA and the ATP, and you kind of you work your way around that, and you start growing, and then eventually the other leagues hear about you and what you're doing, and they come along.
Yeah, I was going to say congrats, because you just got ATP NBA on board with the rest of your roster. Some of our listeners are sort of in that space with their startup where they need to get to that point, where that inflection point where they're able to spread their businesses to as many places as possible. And a lot of people think it's like investing in BD, pick up the phone, getting on a plane, selling, right? Your software, your platform, whatever it may be. What do you think it was for you that enabled you, obviously besides your pro athlete connections, got Breakaway into where they are now?
I wish I had a great answer for that, and I wish there was an answer that worked for every business, because I'd sell it. But the
We
truth
never
is,
know who it might hit though. What worked for you?
a lot of, I mean, a lot of it is that boots on a boot.
Okay.
You got to get out there, right? And like the problem with the professional space and the B2B space in a lot of ways, in professional sports, it's not a marketing game, right? You can't just like market your face off and get the NBA to sign up. Like you got to know the chief medical officer of the NBA, and so you got to
Navigating to
figure
the right
out.
person. Going
Yeah,
to
you got to find the
right?
right person, and I would say that has allowed us to shortcut some of that process, right? We didn't have to go in low level and then wait 2 weeks to get the phone call with this guy and wait 2 weeks to get a phone call with that guy. And then he canceled on Zoom so that I get to talk to this person again. And then I get to go back to that. Like, if you can have that direct phone call into a league, and here's the thing, getting a no is fine, right? That means if the NFL says no, not right now, then stop calling them. Then find time to go to the other person who's going to get you. I think people in the sports space get obsessed with logos. And you're like, sometimes that works and it looks fancy on decks, and then you look at everyone's deck and they got logos all over the place, and you don't, and it's tough for real people to tell like which one of these contracts are substance and which one of them are just kind of work. Well, like you got that'll show itself, right? Like if you can talk to the CMO and you get him to talk to the investors, or he does the sale, helps you with the sales call and stuff like that. Like right now, like that's crucial in our business, is those relationships with the higher level people at those leagues to help us solidify our product as well as our business.
It goes back to your point about having strong EQ, right? Assessing, is this the right person that's going to advance me forward or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to actually punch back to something you said earlier in one of your answers to Chris. You said you didn't major in math or computer science because math didn't mix well with football. I bet you probably think otherwise now, right? A little bit. There's just so much. I asked that question because I want to know what you think, like in the future. I want to like kind of like.
Okay, I'm talking about more as like I'm 18 years old and I have to pick a major, and I look at when all the math classes were, they were like an hour before practice, when all the speech communication classes were like at 9, 10, and 11. And I was like, I'm gonna do those because then I would have like an hour and a half before practice. People that like did not play sports in college do not realize how difficult it is to go through it is not a normal college experience. When I talk to people that are like, oh yeah, that was my favorite teacher, I never got to pick a teacher in my life. I never got to pick a class because of its teacher. It was what time would it fit into my football schedule. There's a football schedule, there's what I have to do, and then there's all the pre-meeting stuff and post-meeting stuff. And then so what classes fit into this? It wasn't the other people were like, oh yeah, that's not, no, I didn't get any of those decisions. It was like math classes just ran on too long. I would have loved to take one or two. But like, yeah, it just didn't work. And I wasn't willing to try.
Good major in both things, but now you are in the sort of real world, if you will, and you just see a lot of math making an impact in the football world, right? And I want to ask you, sort of closing out here, where do you see, beyond just Breakaway and maybe full Breakaway into this, in performance science, data analytics, and sports tech at large, like next 5 years, next 10 years, where's the puck headed?
Well, there's not going to be all right, well, I'll answer this. I'll take a step back. I think that the sports industry runs on, it's a media business. And we're downstream from that data, right? And so like the media industry is in a very interesting space right now. And I think a lot of people are just kind of like pushing that under the rug because the NFL still has like 93 of the top 100 watched shows of 2023. Okay, that's great. But like if you ask the Baltimore Orioles, like what is going to happen when you lose out on that like $26 million check from the RSNs? Like that means I'm not signing 4 players that I would like, or maybe actually for the Orioles, probably 7 players that they would normally like. And like that affects players and that affects contracts. That affects those decisions. And when you're not spending as much money on players, you're not spending much money on performance. You're not spending much money on sports science. And so the media industry, in my opinion, needs to get in the next 4 or 5 years needs a new hero, right? And I think people thought that social media would fix that, and it certainly has filled some gaps here and there, but like that's not what it was designed for. It was not designed for to supplement RSN contracts. It's a tech that lets you talk to me and Chris, and to hear a conversation that we have and to share individuals' thoughts. Whereas like TV is a different type of medium, and so I'm interested to see what happens there. And I think that'll affect everything downstream. In terms of what's specifically happening in performance science and sports science, the amount of data collected is only going to grow. It's only going to get a lot cheaper, which means it's going to go further and further downstream. It's going to get more and more accurate as it gets more and more granular. It'll be less and less subjective, because right now the data that is typically extracted is of someone who used to be a physical therapist and working on knees, and now they have a device that really analyzes knees, right? And so like they got really good at that. Well, now as the tech gets cheaper, more and more people that were just specialists get to scale their own knowledge about the space, right? So like it blows my mind that my friend's 37 years old and got his hip replaced. But like that is going on, right? And so like that world is what we're running into, where that specialization of that information is growing and growing and growing, and that's only going to have a bigger effect on kind of the data space that I live in. The more personalized information we're going to get. I think all the Apples and the Googles and the Amazons agree that the end user is the owner of this information, and they deserve to have access to it, and they be able to restrict it and do what they want with it. And so as more of that data is collected, it'll be interesting to see how it's shared, how it's moved from person to person, how it makes its way into the media world, how it makes its way into the gambling world. I don't have all those answers. I certainly pay a ton of attention to the Thursday night Amazon Prime broadcast, when they put the data that I worked on 6 years ago with Second Spectrum is now making its way to TV. Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, am I 6 years ahead of this? Because that's long. So like you think a lot about that, but I'm certainly obviously in this space. I'm bullish that more and better data is being collected. And there's been a lot more little wins lately. And that like you see the consolidation, a lot of the youth sports space has allowed a lot of new technologies, and for like that mom and pop industry to grow up. I can watch any high school football game pretty much anywhere now. That's wild. Women's volleyball is blowing up, and now I can watch basically a lot of college women's volleyball. Soon you'll be able to watch college, high school club volleyball. And so like, just like I said, data follows media. And so like, if that industry is growing, data is going to follow right behind it. And that gets me excited.
Yeah, I think spot on. I'm tracking to everything you're saying. I love what you said in the beginning. Just the meaning of having a new winner in the media space. I think we're in the midst of a generational shift in tastes altogether. Like it's not the Zs, it's the alphas, and they're a completely different breed altogether. Like how they think about sports, how they even process and take in data. And so I'm with you in kind of like long for the ride. Really excited to see what's ahead.
I'm curious what you think, like, so you guys have worked in this space, you've seen like different technologies. What were ones that you guys were sure they were going to work that were not, in terms of data and tech or health and wellness? Because like those are the ones that I feel like we don't learn enough from. Because like I thought what was it? What was the one that raised like $100 million and they were going to charge you $1 to watch the last fourth quarter?
Buzzer.
Like I was like, oh, that seems smart. I get that. Like it follows all the whatever Deloitte reports that we hear about Generation Z and how they want to watch TV, but yet it failed miserably.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a case of like millennials thinking about Generation Zs and having had access to all the right research papers of like what they like and what they prefer, but where they kind of miss, and I'm thinking out loud in this answer right now, is like, are they willing to pay for it? How much is that worth versus the stack of other stuff that they are looking at? Somebody's TikTok stream, somebody's Insta, like, like how valuable is that versus the other things, right? And so, I mean, we can probably go on and kind of pick apart all the different ways in which they may have had a miss, but my guess is there's something amiss in terms of the market sizing of things. It wasn't as big. While it probably served that segment right in terms of what they want. Like, do I wish I could have like filet mignon every night? Absolutely. Would I pay for it every night? No. If someone gave it to me for free, I would take it, kind of thing. I love it, right? So my guess is that. I mean, Chris, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that one.
Where my mind goes to right away is Peloton, right? I think it was $80 billion market cap at one point. It's probably about 4 billion now. One that you thought, well, A, you didn't think it could have got that big, and then the pandemic hit and it got that big. And then B, how did it fall so fast? And I think with that one, it got too big too fast, right? And it got too big for the wrong reason, right? People couldn't get to the gyms, people couldn't access certain things, so they ordered Peloton bikes. But then they started trying to control distribution, maybe marking up the margin, upcharging on subscription, and they kind of got over their skis, right? And they hired a bunch of people, spent a ton of money to try to keep up with the demand. And then when the demand diminished a little bit, that's when you saw, pretty much all the numbers just fall decreasingly down. And then there was layoffs, and then there was lawsuits for people getting injured and all sorts of things. So Dave, that's the one that kind of comes to my mind is Peloton, but there's still a lot of it kicking. And some might say, hey, they're only 4 or 5 billion and that they're a failure. I would disagree, because that's still a freaking big number.
If you tell me I'm a failure at $5 billion, I'd be like, you call me a failure every day.
Well, that's what you could bet. But I want to answer one thing you said though. Like, what are some of the things that you thought could have made it but didn't make it? Not just like in startup, but just maybe this is not a question we answer, but I thought we leave everybody to think about and ponder about is on that whole connected fitness world, maybe there's just too much gadget. I feel like we're moving to a world where it's like, I don't know how to describe it, like more seamless, like more ephemeral, more in your body. Like, I don't even need that stuff. Like, I have technology I've purchased. I'm like a gadget freak, and I've purchased stuff to help me meditate and all this stuff. But like, maybe you don't need all this stuff. Maybe it's like one device. Maybe it's one chip. Maybe it's like one goggle, one contact. Like, I just think we need to move to fewer things. That's just a thought. That's just a thought. I know that's why all those things are out there. I don't know if we need it.
Or maybe we just move in general, right? We have all these gadgets, but we could just go for a walk for 20 minutes and meditate as we walk, right? Why don't we just start there instead of buying these gadgets and going from there? I know we're running low on time, and we wanted to make sure we get the questions in too, right, Matilda?
Yeah, we can cut this part out. I can tell the team to cut this part as we're talking, but Dave, Chris, you guys have like 5 minutes just to close out on the fire rounds, because everybody loves that. I'll just do it really quick right now. Yeah.
Perfect.
We might go a couple of minutes over. Is that okay? Like 3 minutes over or something? Okay, we'll just do this quick. And now we want to close out with our fire rounds. So Dave, I'm going to say a statement or ask a question. I want you to give me the fastest thing that comes to your head. Okay?
Go for it.
Ready to play? All right. What was the best piece of advice someone gave you during your transition from the sports field?
Just that was kind of like a just do it, or like just go stay busy. It was like keep moving forward is probably the right way to phrase it.
Yeah, don't think, just do kind of thing.
Yeah, just like the more you sit and wait for the perfect opportunity, the more you realize won't show up, and then you look up and spend 3 years, and now your resume is terrible, and everyone's wondering what happened to you the last 3 years. Like, just keep moving forward.
Carpe diem, I love it. Where do you find your inspiration?
I'm an avid reader, so I kind of churn through books and kind of find it quotes. I always like a good quote, and sometimes they speak to me, sometimes they really don't. But I would say I find a lot of inspiration in different books. My favorite book of all time is The Arsenal of Democracy with Henry Ford, and why he built all the planes for World War II, essentially. So like kind of like I like a good business personal book is kind of been my most recent inspirations.
Love it, love it. What are you currently geeking about right now?
I'm a big I'm trying to figure out how we can hack into Apple Watch's challenge mode. And that like the only thing that really gets me to pay attention to my, not only, but one of the main thing that gets me to pay attention to my Apple Watch and actually doing it is to beat my friends. I challenged 2 friends and I've never beaten them. And we find out all sorts of ways to hack it to get your points. I mean, it's obvious you can like log walks, but like we've been pretty creative on stuff that we've logged and what we've done and what you chart in there. And so I find that the hacking of the Apple Watch and what that does pretty fun to get into and kind of dive into the data science. Like why is a hit recording more than a cross trainer? If I do the same movements, like what is it actually calculating? And so
Love it. You're gaming.
stuff.
Love it. And lastly, who are your top 2 mentors?
So I got a business school one. His name was Malcolm Cloyd. Malcolm was spoke to our class one day. He was a former professional soccer player, like he's older, like way back in the day, and he ended up working in the oil and gas industry outside of Houston. So I walked up to him after class and basically introduced myself, and I was like, "Can I take you out for coffee? I'd love to hear how you transitioned from sporting career to working in the oil industry." And I was like, by the way, I lived in Houston for 6 years. Where'd you live? And so we kind of bonded over that. And he's been a mentor to me for a long time. And it's funny, like he was like one of those guys you don't really ask to be a mentor. They kind of like slowly happens over time as they realize this is their role. And I was like, I remember one day at lunch, I was like, by the way, I referenced you as like a mentor. I don't want you to find that like offensive. He's like, I know. I was like, all right, cool. The other one is a dear family friend of mine, Howard Kalmanson. He is the single largest communications owner in the United States. He owns all the the Chinese and Hispanic, Mexican, not Mexican, Spanish speaking radio stations kind of across the country. And I talk to him a lot of times about scale. And if there's anyone that talks to me about simplifying the sell, it's him. He's like, you work in an industry that like a bunch of nerds talking Moneyball. He's like, no one cares about that. He's like, I sell radio. He's like, I sell ads. He's like, that's what I do. And I had to simplify that for people for a long time. So he's been a big mentor of mine for as long as I've been around, since I didn't really have a dad in my life. He stepped up and been that person for a long time.
Right. It's great. It's a great role to have. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. We really enjoyed having this conversation. It's good to see you again, and hopefully we'll catch each other in Vegas.
Oh, good close.
Better plan that, guys.
Hey, start resting up now, Dave. Electrolytes, IVs.
Yeah, we need all the health and wellness gadgets and devices we can find for that visit.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Take care.
It's
Bye.
great to see you.